At some point in your life, your money will earn more in a single year than you do. And here's the crazy part. You probably won't even notice when it happens. You could be sitting at your desk on a random Tuesday morning, answering emails, working overtime, chasing your next paycheck, while somewhere inside your investment account, your money has quietly started making more money than you. For some investors, this happens at 60. For others, 50. But if you started investing at 25, the math says it could happen around age 42. Not 65, 42. There's an exact moment when your money stops being something you work for and starts working harder than you do. But almost everyone misses that moment because they're watching the wrong number. In fact, there are 3 major tipping points in your investing life. 2 of them feel important. Only one actually changes everything. And once you see the math behind it, you'll never look at your investment account the same way again. Here's what most people think about retirement and wealth building. You work, you save, you invest. And then, at some magical age, 60, 65, maybe 70, you finally have enough money to stop working. Your wealth is built. Now you can relax. That's the narrative we've been sold. And it's not entirely wrong, but it's also missing something fundamental. It misses the moment when the math actually flips. Here's the thing about money. It behaves differently once it reaches a certain size. Not because the interest rate changes, not because your investment strategy changes, but because of pure mathematics. When you have a small amount invested, say $50,000, and it earns 7% per year, you make $3,500. That's nice, but it pales in comparison to your salary if you're earning $80,000 or $100,000 a year from your job. But what happens when that $50,000 becomes $200,000? Now, 7% returns generates $14,000 a year. Still less than your salary, but the gap is closing. And what happens at $300,000? You're earning $21,000 a year from compounding, getting closer. But here's what nobody talks about. The moment when the money your investments earn in a single year exceeds the money you contribute to your investments in that same year. That's a real psychological and mathematical pivot point. This is what I call the annual crossover point. And for someone who started investing at 25 with consistent contributions, this happens around age 42. I want to let that sink in. Age 42. Not retirement age 42. The 3 crossover points nobody discusses. Most financial advice talks about the crossover point like it's one singular moment. It's not. There are actually 3, and they're completely different. The first crossover, annual momentum, around age 42. This is when the money your investments earn in one year beats the money you contribute that year. Let's say you save $12,000 a year. Your portfolio is earning $13,000 in returns. Boom. Your investments just outpaced your savings rate. This is the moment you might notice your account statement jumped more from market gains than from your contributions. The second crossover, cumulative wealth, around age 47. This one's more subtle. This is when all the interest you've ever earned exceeds all the money you've ever put in. Let's say you've contributed $250,000 over 22 years. Now your account has $400,000. That means $150,000 of your wealth didn't come from your paycheck. It came from compounding. That's the moment when compounding has done more work than you have. Psychologically, this is powerful. You're no longer the primary wealth creator. Math is. The third crossover, financial escape velocity, around age 50. This is the one that matters. This is when your investment returns don't just exceed your contributions, they exceed your living expenses. Now your money is creating new wealth faster than you're spending money to live. Your portfolio is funding your lifestyle. You could theoretically stop working and your account would still grow. This is the moment when money actually starts working harder than you need it to. Most people confuse these 3. Someone hits their annual crossover at 42, feels good for a minute, then wonders why they still need to work. It's because they haven't hit financial escape velocity yet. The fact that your portfolio earned $13,000 doesn't mean you can live on $13,000 if your expenses are $60,000. But once you hit financial escape velocity, and for many middle-class savers this happens between 48 to 52, something fundamental shifts. You're no longer building wealth to eventually retire. You're watching wealth get built whether you work or not. Here's where it gets interesting, and frankly, a little frustrating if you know about it. Over a 40-year investment horizon, let's say from age 25 to age 65, more than 60% of your total wealth is generated in the final 10 years. Let me repeat that because it sounds impossible. Over 60% of your wealth is created between ages 50 55 and 65. Think about what that means. You're working hard for 30 years. You're contributing consistently. You're watching your portfolio grow. And then, between 55 and 65, your portfolio nearly doubles. The curve goes vertical. The compounding accelerates so much that a single year's returns might exceed a decade's worth of earlier returns. This is called the vertical phase, and it's the most misunderstood part of wealth building. Here's why it matters. Most people can't see this happening. When you're 55 and your portfolio jumps $400,000 in a year, you might think, wow, lucky market year. You don't realize you're in the phase where $400,000 annual gains are normal. You're not lucky. You're just now feeling the full force of compound interest. But here's the cruel part of this timing. The exact moment your wealth is accelerating most aggressively is also the moment when your cognitive ability to manage it peaks and then starts declining. Research from the Federal Reserve found something troubling. People's ability to make sound financial decisions peaks around age 55 to 60, then gradually declines. And their credit scores begin deteriorating about 2.5 years before cognitive decline becomes noticeable. So you finally reach the phase where your wealth compounds most explosively and your brain is simultaneously starting its own decline. This is why so many wealthy people in their 60s and 70s make poor financial decisions. They're trying to navigate their most complex financial period with a less capable brain. Here's something that doesn't make intuitive sense, but is mathematically true. The rule of 72 says your money doubles every 10 years at 7% returns, right? So your first $50,000 doubles to $100,000 in 10 years. Your second doubling takes another 10 years to go to $200,000, and so on. The time between doublings stays the same. The time is constant. But the dollar amounts? The dollar amounts become explosively unequal. Your first doubling, $50,000 to $100,000. That's an additional $50,000. Your second doubling, $100,000 to $200,000. That's an additional $100,000. Twice as much. Your third doubling, $200,000 to $400,000. That's an additional $200,000. 4 times as much as your first doubling. By the time you hit your fifth doubling, from $400,000 to $800,000, you've just created more new wealth than your first 3 doublings combined. And here's the kicker. By this point, the market just needs a normal 7% year for you to create the same amount of new wealth that took you 3 years of contributions earlier. This is when the crossover fully happens, not just mathematically, emotionally. You're finally making more from doing nothing than from doing something. But because the dollar amounts are increasing on a larger base, it doesn't feel as impressive as it should. You've gone numb to zeros. There's one more thing almost nobody knows about reaching these crossover points. The timeline can be short significantly. And not through some exotic investment strategy or stock picking secret, just math. If you're planning to invest $12,000 a year for 30 years, the research shows you can reach your annual crossover around year 11. But here's the secret. If you front load your savings, if you do $18,000 a year for just the first 3 years, then drop back to $12,000, you reach that same annual crossover in year 9 instead. You shorten your timeline by 2 years by saving aggressively for just 36 months. Why? Because every dollar you invest early gets 7 to 8 more years to compound. Those initial dollars are worth more than dollars you invest later. Even though the absolute amount is smaller, the leverage is exponential. This is why conventional wisdom about consistent, boring savings is partially wrong. Consistent, boring savings is optimal for total wealth, but for reaching the inflection point, a strategic early burst is mathematically superior. It's one of the weirdest financial facts that nobody acts on. You can shorten your path to financial independence by years by doing more work at the beginning than less later. Most people do the opposite. They save 10% in their 20s and 30s, then ramp up to 25% in their 50s when they realize they're behind. By then, the compounding power has been wasted. Here's the number that actually matters for your specific situation. If you have 50 times your annual living expenses invested, you've reached what I call passive income infinity. Let's say you spend $40,000 a year to live comfortably. 50 times that is $2 million. At $2 million, with a conservative 4% withdrawal rate, you're generating $80,000 a year in passive income. You need $40,000. You have twice what you need. Now, the math math isn't just, can I retire? The math is, how much optionality do I have? With 50 times your expenses, you can work if you want to, not work if you don't want to, give money away, take risks on new ventures, reduce your stress by 90%. It's not just a number. It's the moment when financial constraints stop controlling your life. The crazy part? Most people have no idea what 50 times their annual expenses actually looks like in dollar terms. They've never done the math. They're just working and hoping something clicks. If you know this number, if you've actually calculated, I need 50 times $40,000, which is $2 million, suddenly the path becomes less abstract. You can work backwards. You can see the timeline. You can see where you are on the curve. Here's something that messes with people's heads. The money you invest in your 20s will represent less than 1% of your final wealth at retirement. Let's say you invest $200 a month from age 25 to age 65. Your total contributions are $96,000, but your final portfolio at 65, roughly $500,000 plus. The $96,000 you put in is less than 20% of the final number. The other 80% is compounding. But here's the paradox. Without those early contributions, you'd have nothing to compound. And those early dollars have roughly 8 to 10 times more leverage than dollars invested at 55. So the money that represents less than 1% of your final wealth is simultaneously the most important money you'll ever invest. Most people don't realize this. They see that early contributions are tiny relative to total wealth, so they think, why bother investing in my 20s? I can catch up later. No, you cannot out-earn time. A person who invests $200 a month from 25 to 65 ends up with roughly double the wealth of someone who invests $1,000 a month from 35 to 65. The 40-year head start beats the higher contributions every single time. So here's the practical part. Here's what you actually do with this information. First, figure out which crossover point you're closest to. If you're 40 and you've been investing since 25, your annual crossover might be in the next 1 to 3 years. Your financial escape velocity might be 5 to 10 years away. Second, understand that once you hit financial escape velocity, the game changes psychologically. You might keep working. You might like your job. That's fine. But the equation has flipped. You're not working to survive financially anymore. You're working for other reasons. Purpose, social connection, health benefits, or just out of habit. Third, prepare for the vertical phase. If you're entering your 50s, prepare for your portfolio to accelerate in ways that might feel shocking. You're not dreaming. This is normal. This is the vertical phase. And fourth, don't get cute about it. This all happens because of boring, consistent investing in time. Not because of stock picks. Not because of complex strategies. Just compounding. The people who nail this are the people who automate it, forget about it, and don't touch it. The age your money starts working harder than you isn't based on a birthday. It's not 62 or 65 or 67. It's based on mathematics. For someone who started investing at 25, it happens around 42 for annual momentum, around 47 for true compounding dominance, and around 50 for true financial escape velocity. But most people miss these moments because they're looking at their statement thinking, my salary is still more important. They don't realize the curve has flipped. The real insight is this. These moments aren't random. They're predictable. They're mathematical. And if you know the math, you know exactly where you are on your own curve right now. You can work backward. You can see the timeline. You can see when money stops being a constraint on your life. And that visibility, that clarity about exactly when and how you're becoming financially independent is more powerful than any amount of generic motivation. You don't need another get-rich-quick scheme. You need to understand the math of when you're already getting rich. Slowly, predictably, mathematically. That moment might be further away than you thought, or it might be closer than you realized, but it's coming.